In a move that has sent shockwaves across the geopolitical landscape, Côte d'Ivoire has just delivered a stunning announcement demanding the immediate withdrawal of French troops from its borders. For decades, this West African nation has been a steadfast ally of France, a cornerstone of its influence in the region, and a key player in maintaining the fragile balance of power across Francophone Africa. But today, that long-standing relationship has taken a dramatic turn, with Côte d'Ivoire boldly declaring its independence from the shadow of its former colonial power.
My dear compatriots, dear brothers and sisters, we can be proud of our army, whose modernization is now a reality. It is within this framework that we have decided on the coordinated and organized withdrawal of French forces from Ivory Coast. Thus, the camp of the 43rd Marine Infantry Battalion in Port Bouet will be handed over to the armed forces of Ivory Coast starting this January 2025.
This isn't just another chapter in the growing trend of African nations rejecting foreign influence. This is a seismic shift. Côte d'Ivoire has long been seen as a symbol of stability and cooperation with France, housing French military bases and serving as a linchpin for French operations in West Africa. Yet, with this single, decisive move, the Ivorian government has signaled a break from the past and a desire to chart its own course in a rapidly changing world. What's behind this unprecedented demand? Some say it's a culmination of years of simmering discontent among Ivorian leaders and citizens, fueled by frustrations over France's perceived interference in domestic affairs and its role in regional instability. Others point to the broader context, a wave of anti-French sentiment sweeping across Africa, from Mali to Burkina Faso, as nations seek to reclaim their sovereignty and redefine their relationships with former colonial powers. However, the implications of this decision go far beyond Côte d'Ivoire's borders. This moment is a stark reminder of the shifting tides in global geopolitics as African nations rise to assert their autonomy and challenge the status quo. It's also a critical test for France, whose influence in Africa is waning in the face of growing competition from other global powers like China, Russia, and even Turkey. For Côte d'Ivoire, this bold move is both a risk and an opportunity. Will it usher in a new era of true independence and self-determination? Or could it destabilize the region, creating a vacuum that other powers are all too eager to fill? One thing is certain, Côte d'Ivoire's announcement marks a pivotal moment in African history, one that will be analyzed, debated, and felt for years to come. In this video, we'll dive deep into the motivations behind this decision, the reactions it sparked both in Africa and abroad, and what this could mean for the future of Côte d'Ivoire, France, and the entire African continent. This is more than a news story. This is a defining moment in the ongoing struggle for Africa's place in the world. Before we dive in, please show your support for African empowerment by liking this video, subscribing to our channel, and helping us spread these incredible stories across the globe. Anti-French sentiments have been spreading across Africa like wildfire in recent years. So far, 6 countries, Mali in 2022, Burkina Faso and Niger in 2023, Chad and Senegal in 2024, and now Côte d'Ivoire, have demanded the evacuation of thousands of French troops and warplanes from their borders. But Côte d'Ivoire's ultimatum has been the most shocking for many reasons. The relationship between France and Côte d'Ivoire's President Alassane Ouattara is a complex and multifaceted one, deeply rooted in Côte d'Ivoire's colonial history, its strategic importance in West Africa, and Ouattara's own political and professional trajectory. For years, there have been strong rumors that Ouattara was placed in power to serve France's interests, and they are not without basis, given France's historically interventionist role in its former colonies. Let's begin with a brief history of Alassane Ouattara's rise to power. Alassane Ouattara, an economist by training, spent much of his early career outside Côte d'Ivoire, working for international organizations such as the International Monetary Fund and the Central Bank of West African States. His globalist credentials and economic expertise made him a favorite of Western powers, including France, which has historically prioritized leaders who align with their economic and political strategies in Francophone Africa. Ouattara's contested victory in the 2010 presidential election marked a turning point in France's involvement in Côte d'Ivoire. Laurent Gbagbo, the then incumbent president, refused to concede, plunging the country into a violent post-election crisis. France, through its military Operation Licorne and significant diplomatic efforts, played a pivotal role in ensuring Ouattara's eventual ascent to power by aiding in the capture of Gbagbo. This direct intervention fueled allegations that Ouattara owed his presidency to France and was, in essence, a proxy for French interests. France has long viewed Côte d'Ivoire as a key pillar of its influence in West Africa. The country is rich in natural resources, including cocoa, coffee, and oil, and its economic stability underpins the broader Francophone West African region. Critics argue that France supported Ouattara to ensure a leader in Côte d'Ivoire who would maintain policies favorable to French economic interests. In return, Ouattara has been a staunch defender of the CFA franc, a currency system viewed by many African leaders and economists as a mechanism of neo-colonial control. France's interest in maintaining the CFA franc system aligns with Ouattara's policies, leading to suspicions that his presidency is aligned with preserving French dominance over West African economies. Under Ouattara, Côte d'Ivoire has pursued liberal economic reforms, including privatization and foreign investment-friendly policies. While these have partially bolstered economic growth, they have also been heavily criticized for disproportionately benefiting foreign companies, particularly French firms. As if to heighten the rumors and suspicions, Ouattara has maintained a close relationship with successive French presidents, including Nicolas Sarkozy and Emmanuel Macron. Sarkozy's administration was particularly instrumental in supporting Ouattara during the 2010 crisis. These relationships have been portrayed by critics as evidence of an overly cozy dynamic. Opposition figures, including those loyal to Laurent Gbagbo, have frequently accused Ouattara of prioritizing French interests over those of Ivorian citizens. This has deepened political polarization in the country. Additionally, anti-French sentiments have been growing in the region for several years and have been the major cause of several coups and coup attempts in Niger, Mali, and Burkina Faso. However, Ouattara failed to support these movements and openly criticized the planned departure of French and European troops from Mali in 2022, emphasizing that it would create a security vacuum in the region. If anything, this move completely sealed his image as a stooge for the Europeans.
We believe the fight against terrorism is essential for Mali, for Burkina, for Niger, and for neighboring countries. So the departure of Barkhane and Takuba creates a vacuum. We will be forced to increase our defense forces. We will be forced to ramp up the protection of our borders. We will be obliged to buy weapons, to have a greater professionalization, but this is our duty too. The national armies must solve the problems of our national territories, and that is our philosophy, and we will make sure of it.
Though Ouattara tried to present his criticism as being rooted in pragmatic concerns about regional security, the effectiveness of counter-terrorism efforts, and the broader implications of diminishing Western involvement in the Sahel, critics countered that he was only trying to secure his master's interests in the region. Over the years, there have also been accusations and criticisms, particularly from Mali and Burkina Faso, suggesting that Ouattara's policies and alignment with France furthered neo-colonialist goals in Francophone Africa, undermining the sovereignty struggles of nations like Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger. In July 2022, 49 Ivorian soldiers were detained in Mali on charges of being mercenaries. While Côte d'Ivoire and the UN claimed they were part of a peacekeeping mission, Mali's government suggested it was an act of subversion. This incident exacerbated tensions, with Mali's authorities implying that Côte d'Ivoire was acting on behalf of foreign powers to destabilize Mali's transitional government. 3 women among the detained 49 Ivorian soldiers were released in September 2022, and the remaining 46 were pardoned by Mali's military junta leader, Colonel Assimi Goïta, in January 2023. These incidents, Ouattara's close ties to Paris, and his defense of French policies have positioned him as a symbol of the old Franco-African order. As a result, critics were immediately suspicious when, during an end-of-year address, President Ouattara announced that France would begin an immediate evacuation of its over 600 troops in January. "We have decided on the concerted and organized withdrawal of French forces in Ivory Coast," he said, adding that the military infantry battalion of Port Bouet that is run by the French army will be handed over to Ivorian troops.
My dear compatriots, dear brothers and sisters, we can be proud of our army, whose modernization is now a reality. It is within this framework that we have decided on the coordinated and organized withdrawal of French forces from Ivory Coast. Thus, the camp of the 43rd Marine Infantry Battalion in Port Bouet will be handed over to the armed forces of Ivory Coast starting this January 2025.
Has President Ouattara suddenly reversed his neo-colonial leanings, or is there a bigger play here? History and logic suggest it's the latter. After the first wave of anti-French sentiments, which forced France to withdraw its troops from Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger, experts warned that France is now using a different neo-colonialist approach meant to calm the waters and create a false narrative that France is completely withdrawing from its former colonies. Instead of the complete withdrawal that patriotic Africans are looking forward to, experts believe France is conniving with leaders like Ouattara to deceive the general populace. What we're witnessing today isn't a genuine departure. It's a calculated illusion, a sleight of hand by France to quell growing anti-French sentiment while stealthily reinforcing its influence in Africa. This so-called withdrawal of troops and resources is eerily reminiscent of colonial tactics from decades past. To understand the present, we must revisit the past and uncover the roots of this strategy. Let's go back to April 1958. Togo made a bold stand against French domination, with an overwhelming 97% of its population rejecting French control in a historic vote for independence. The ripples of this decision were felt across the region. 5 months later, Guinea took its destiny into its own hands, becoming the first French African colony to declare full independence on September 28, 1958. Guinea's leader, Ahmed Sékou Touré, famously said, "We prefer poverty and freedom to riches and slavery." France's response? Brutal retaliation. As they departed, French officials destroyed infrastructure, taking everything from light bulbs to telephone cables, leaving Guinea in ruins. But the wave of resistance couldn't be stopped. Cameroon and Algeria rose up in defiance, but their courage was met with horrifying brutality. In Cameroon, over 250,000 people were massacred during the nationalist uprising. In Algeria, the fight for independence became one of the bloodiest liberation wars in modern history. Over 1 million Algerians lost their lives, and countless others endured unimaginable suffering in internment camps and under torture. These uprisings showed France that its colonial grip was slipping. Charles de Gaulle, then president of France, devised a sinister plan to maintain control while appearing to relinquish it. He famously stated that it was cheaper and wiser to pretend to leave rather than to be chased out. And so, in August 1960, France staged a series of so-called independence ceremonies across its colonies: Gabon, Côte d'Ivoire, Chad, Benin, Burkina Faso, Niger, and the Central African Republic. But these ceremonies were nothing more than political theater. Behind the scenes, France installed puppet leaders loyal to Paris, ensuring that true sovereignty remained a distant dream. The new African governments were shackled by the infamous Colonial Pact. This agreement guaranteed that France would continue to control key sectors of their economies, from natural resources to banking. The CFA franc, a currency created and controlled by France, became a symbol of this economic domination. Military bases were strategically maintained, and African armies were trained and equipped by French forces to ensure their allegiance to Paris. Leaders who resisted this system, like Thomas Sankara in Burkina Faso and Patrice Lumumba in the Congo, were quickly silenced, assassinated, overthrown, or exiled. Independence was little more than a facade, a cruel joke played on millions of Africans yearning for true freedom. Fast forward to today, and we see history repeating itself in new ways. Emmanuel Macron, the current French president, speaks of redefining relations with African nations, promising a new era of partnership. But actions speak louder than words. France has announced troop withdrawals from several countries, including Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger. But this isn't an exit, it's a rebranding. The playbook remains the same. reduce visible military presence while doubling down on covert operations, economic control, and influence through NGOs and training programs. And now, Côte d'Ivoire is stepping into the spotlight, asking France to leave its borders. But is this the start of a genuine break, or are we witnessing another chapter of France's strategic adaptation? By reducing its visible footprint, France hopes to neutralize growing anti-French sentiment while maintaining control through other means. The CFA franc still binds much of West Africa to French economic policies. French companies continue to dominate key industries, from oil and gas to telecommunications. And military partnerships persist, ensuring that African armies remain reliant on French training, equipment, and strategic oversight. As for Ouattara's immediate motivations for agreeing to such diabolical plans to deceive Ivorians, experts say his re-election ambition after 3 5-year terms in office is a key motivator.
To be honest, it feels as if President Alassane Ouattara is preempting the growth of anti-French sentiment. This is an election year for Côte d'Ivoire, and he has to make decisive decisions to make it seem as though the election is going to be independent, that France-Afrique is not going to influence future politics, security, policies, or even inter-regional relations. Anti-French sentiment has targeted Côte d'Ivoire over the years, particularly coming from the Sahel, where military rulers they accuse Côte d'Ivoire of hosting rare bases for France. They're pro-Russian and anti-Western activists who have been targeting Côte d'Ivoire with anti-French sentiment as a way of trying to make it come from the country naturally. It hasn't happened, but if it does emerge during the election, the presence of French forces is likely to undermine that election or undermine a potential re-election of Ouattara as we wait for him to either declare his candidacy or not, and what his policy will be in the future. Well, France now has to realign its presence in the region because of the hostilities coming from military governments and even from the public. So one of the things it is doing, as you pointed out, is realigning how many forces will be present in the region. Quite a number have reduced due to hostilities with governments, but also being proactive about pulling down its own troops. It also just means that France may have to think of other strategic points to be influential. So outside of politics and security, economic influence. The recent visit to France by the Nigerian President Bola Tinubu, where he signed agreements in agriculture and broad spectrums of the economy, is one area that France is looking at. And also interestingly, Kenya will be hosting one of the very first France-Africa summits, which has always been held in France. So France is looking actively for new allies while also trying to reduce its presence, especially under President Macron, because he has been the one who has faced the most backlash from Francophone West Africa, and this has had a ripple effect on French commercial interests, which are now diversifying across the continent.
Africans must remain vigilant against all forms of neo-colonial and imperialist threats. This is a crucial time for the future of this great continent, and Africans cannot allow themselves to be deceived for the umpteenth time by these colonial leaders and their puppets. While France has lost woefully in countries like Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger, it's seeking new partnerships in Anglophone countries like Nigeria and Ghana, which hold a lot of economic and geopolitical weight in West Africa. The essence of France's actions remains unchanged. Keep Africa shackled while pretending to set it free. It's a strategy of maintaining dominance through subtlety, cloaked in the language of partnership and progress. The question is, how long will Africans continue to accept this facade? And how can the continent unite to achieve true independence and self-determination after centuries of exploitation and betrayal? This isn't just a historical reflection, it's a call to action. Share this video to amplify the voices of those fighting for sovereignty. Comment below with your thoughts on how Africa can chart a new path forward. And don't forget to subscribe for more deep dives into the stories that matter. Together, we can shed light on these injustices and push for real change.